Welcome back. Now that we have a working media query manager that we did in the last lecture, let's now finally start using it and write some real media queries for our page. But before we start doing that, I want to actually take a minute and come back to the order of the media queries that we write here, okay? So I want to recap on why this is the order and not the other way around, okay? Because this is really essential in understanding responsive web design, okay? So imagine that we have a width of 700 pixels for the screen, okay? So in this case, of course, both of these media queries will apply, right? So 700 is less than 1200 and also less than 900. And what happens then? Well, since both of the media queries apply, it will simply be the last declaration that is applied. So both of these have a font size declaration, right? And so the last one of these two is the one that will be applied. So 50%. And that is, of course, the one we want, because 900 is the one that's closer to this 700. If it was the other way around, like this, then at this screen size of 700, we would have the font size of 56%, which was actually only supposed to be used in the range between 900 and 1200, right? And so if we did it like this, this would mess up our entire code or entire structure of our media queries, okay? And so this is the way that we want it. Now, if you happen to be writing a mobile-first website, then it's a complete other way around. So in that case, we have to start with the lower width and move up to the larger width, because everything is the other way around. We have min-width media queries, and so then in that case, we also need to change the order, starting with the lower ones and then move on to the larger screen sizes, okay? So now that we have that out of the way, let's move on and start writing our media queries. And this is the order in which I like to do it, okay? Let me actually write it down for you, and I will do it here in this mixin. So the order in which I like to do this is to start with the base and the typography, then moving on to the more general layout, like header, footer, navigation, and all that stuff. So general layout, and also the grid. Okay, so the grid also needs to be changed. Then the more specific page layout, and then finally changing the components. Okay, and so in this lecture, we will take care of this part. We're going to change some stuff in the base, in the typography, general layout, and grid. And actually, we don't need that many changes because, once again, this overall font size here takes care of most of the changes that we want to make, actually. And so the adjustments that we need to do are pretty minor in most of the cases. Okay, let's fire up our typography file here and then close all of this here. And I'll take a look at our web page. So this is it, still here in the device menu, okay? Now there's something really cool that we can do, what I didn't show you in the last lecture, which is to show actually our media queries, okay? So these are our media queries, these ranges here. So 56.25 is the smallest one. Let me check that out for you. So where is this mixin? So 56.25 is here. So let me zoom that out a bit. So 75. Okay, and so in here we are now in the 56.25 media queries. And actually we have a smaller one, which is this one, but we don't really have one on the page at this point already, okay, because the only 3 media queries that we wrote were the 3 here, and the one for the phone is not here. And so DevTools, of course, cannot know that we actually planned for one for the phone. And so it's gonna come up here later, okay? But anyway, this one here is our breakpoint at 900 pixels, as you can see in here. And then you can also nicely see which one is applying. So when they become darker, means that they are applied. Then you have this one here as well, and all you need to do is to click here, and it goes to the breakpoint. Okay, and also you see here that the blue ones are the max width media queries, and then here the orange ones are the min width. Okay, so Google Chrome also does this nice distinction here for us. Okay, then up here we have simply the responsive way where we can decrease and increase or screen here as we wish, as I showed you. Then we also have a list of devices here, basically where we can test. So like the iPhone or iPhone 5 or the Nexus or whatever. Okay, but we're mostly going to use here our responsive So we were talking about typography. And what do we have in the typography? Well, we have the primary heading, we have secondary heading, tertiary heading, and paragraph. So let's now take a look at what happens with these as we decrease our page. Okay, so you see that they nicely adapt actually, and they still adapt in here. And only down here, almost at 600, is where it starts making some problems. So imagine that we had a device with 300, let's say, and then we would no longer see the text here at all, right? So we have to fix that. And another thing that I want to fix is to actually get rid of this white border here on a smaller screen size, okay? And we can do that, I think, here at 900 pixels. So basically at the tablet portrait mode, okay? So starting from here, let's get rid of this white border now. So that is actually in base, I think. And actually it's, well, it should be, but it's not. So let's actually copy this one here to base, because there should be, yeah, there's one for the body. And this is where it should be. This has nothing to do with typography. And all right, so let's now actually include our media query here. I will just copy it from here. I'm lazy and I don't like to type so much. So just copy this here. And now let's get rid of this padding. 0. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's reload. I'm not sure if it did reload automatically. And so here goes the padding, right? So right here at this breakpoint, now it's gone. And as soon as we increase it, then of course it comes back. So that's the media query already doing its work. Great. So, but what we're doing here before was to actually decrease this entire text here, starting at 600 pixels. So basically our phone media query. So let's do that. So typography and heading primary, and I'm putting it right here. So include, respond, phone, and what do we want to happen here? Well, I think what we should do here is to actually get rid of all this letter spacing. And now I see that actually this should probably be in here, right? Because this is where the font size is actually defined and the letter spacing. So let's get rid of the letter spacing, at least in part. So we had 3.5 rem, let's put it back to 1 rem, and then the font size, let's decrease it to 6 rem. Well, 6 would be the same, so 5 rem. Okay, and then down here, let's do the same. Decrease the letter spacing. Well, not to 0, but maybe to 5 pixels. So 0.5 rem, for example. So let's take a look at that. And yeah, so that looks a bit more natural now. And yeah, now actually you already now have this last media query that we were missing, but now we have one in our actual code, and then here it appears. Okay, so that looks better now. But what about our H2s? So, well, I think they're probably a bit too big here at this point, right? So basically we should probably change them at the 900 pixel media query. So tablet portrait. So let's do that. So heading secondary, include, respond, and we called it tab port. Okay, so let's decrease the font size to like 2.5 maybe. And then for the phone we can make it even smaller. 2.5 like this, and then one for the phone. And remember, the phone is smaller, so it comes after the tablet. Okay, so phone, and then let's say 2 rem, okay? Let's check it out. And yeah, that looks probably better. Okay, so we're not seeing it here on real devices, but for now it's okay to do it like this. So usually I always change everything here in the browser, and then I start testing on real devices. And from there, I usually always see some stuff that I have to change afterwards. But the essential things, so the first and major changes, they can be done here in the browser without any problem usually. Okay. All right. And I think that for the H1 and H2, this is actually already change enough. Okay. Maybe it's even a bit too small. I'm not really sure. So let's put it to 3 and then 2.5 or something. So 3 and 2.5. So that should be better. All right. And with that, we actually already finished the part about the typography and the base settings. Okay. So animations here, they don't need any changes. Utilities also don't need any changes, at least for now. Maybe we'll change something here a bit later, but for now we're good to go here in this folder. Then here in the abstracts folder, there are also no changes. And so now let's move on to the layout. And I'm going to start with the grid, actually. So closing the typography, closing the mix-ins here as well. And so I'm going to start with the grid. So let's take a look at what happens with the grid. So where do we have one of them? So this is a grid with 4 columns in it. And you see that they're becoming really small, right? So really, really small. And it doesn't look like good at all. The same thing here. And where else do we have? I don't think there's any more than this. Here also too. But here it's no problem. But here and here it's definitely not okay like this. So let's go to our breakpoint. And I think where we should change it is here at 900. Okay. So here it's still kind of okay, and we can later make some adjustments here to this. Okay, so right now it's still okay, but below this, these columns, they are definitely too narrow. Okay, so we can't wait until the next breakpoint, which would be this one. So we cannot have them looking like this, all right? So we have to change the grid system right here at the tablet portrait breakpoint. Okay, all right, and what are we going to do in order to fix this? Well, we're simply going to set the width of all the columns to 100%. That's the easiest way to do it, and that's what's usually done on mobile devices. So all the columns are basically transformed into rows. So the entire mobile web page will have only one single column, basically. So include respond tab port. So all of the columns should have a width of 100%. And I'm going to set it to important actually, because I want to make really sure that these widths here are overwritten. Okay. Now the next thing that I have to do is to then of course remove any margin from these columns, right? Because right now they all have this gutter here, but since they are no longer side by side now, we don't need any gutter, right? So margin right, 0. Very simple. Next up, what we should probably change is this gutter here. Okay. So let's open up the variables. So this gutter is an 80 pixels or 8 rem, because 80 pixels is no longer accurate on these lower media queries, right? So we have 8 rem here, but that's way too much, I believe. And so let's create a new variable here called gutter vertical for 6 rem called small. So gutter vertical small. Okay. So where is that? And yeah, here we go. So again, I'm going to copy this. And where is it? Okay, right here. Now this is starting to look a bit confusing. I know. But I think that's okay, given how much writing our code in this way here, which may look a bit strange, improves our lives over just writing original vanilla CSS code. Okay, so even if it looks a bit strange with all this nesting going on, then these includes and all of that going on, you will see that you will become used to it. And yeah, so it's not really a problem. So gutter vertical small here, just to confirm that the name is right. And then let's take a look at it actually. Well, that doesn't look so good for now, but that's because these images here are huge and overlapping, and we're going to fix that later. So one column, next column, next column. But of course, this is not ideal at all, because we probably want some margin here between these columns now, right? Because the columns, they are basically now no longer columns, but just like sub rows, okay? So each of these here should probably have a margin at the bottom. Now, I also have some space here on the right side, and I'm not really sure why that is happening. So let's take a look at that. And it's because of the row, but I'm not sure what's going on. Let's take a look. Oh, the row has a margin right of 6 rem. Why is that? Of course, this should be margin bottom, not margin right. So margin bottom, we had it here, and then we changed it with the media query, right? Okay, what I was saying is that here, the columns, they no longer should have a margin right. Okay, so we changed that, but they should have a margin at the bottom. And I would say it would make sense to make it gutter vertical small as well, because now it's actually vertically aligned and no longer horizontal. So let's take a look at that now. And while it doesn't look ideal for now, because this is way too wide, of course, the row and the columns itself, they look better now than they did before, okay? And the same thing here, of course. So we now have to change some more here about the row, but the distance between them, it looks okay for now. So what we should do here is to also change this max width here, okay? So right now the row is occupying 100% of the available width because the viewport is smaller than the grid width, which is, as you see, 114 rem. And so what max width does is that if the width is lower than the grid width, then it will simply occupy 100% of its available width. But we should now actually change that to a smaller value. Okay, and let's put it to something like 50 rem or something. So max width 50 rem, and that will probably fix this problem. Yeah, so that looks a lot more natural now. All right. So that looks kind of good already. Not perfect, of course, but acceptable. So let's take a look at how this will look on an iPad, for example. Okay. So here is a problem, of course, but we're going to fix this one when we start looking at the individual components. Okay. So right now we're still talking about the width and the overall layout of the page. Okay. But this looks okay. So I think for the grid, we're good to go for now. And the smaller minor things, we're going to fix them later down the road. Okay, so next up, let's talk about the header. And well, the only thing that I see really happening here is maybe this line here. It's becoming way too steep. Okay, so in comparison to this one here, which has this slope, then this one here has a really higher slope, and it doesn't look really good anymore. So this was the initial look we were looking for, right? So something like this. But now as we really decrease the screen, especially moving on here to the mobile screen, then it starts looking a bit weird, right? So let's change that now for the phone only. So closing the grid here and moving on to the header. So right here. So include, respond, phone, and then so what we have to change is these clip paths here. I'm going to change them to 90 VH, and that will probably fix that problem. And so here we go. Well, maybe 90 is even a bit too much. Let's put it to 85. The same thing here as well. And yeah, so that looks pretty good. Okay. So at 620, it's like this, and then bam, there it goes. Next media query, and our change is there, right? Now another thing that we should probably change is this navigation here. It looks a bit too much now here, moving into the center of the stage. Okay, so let's put it a bit more here up in the corner in order to make it look more similar here to this image. Okay, so let's do that and open the navigation. So what we have to change here is the button. So include, respond, and then let's actually take a look at where we want to change this. And I think it starts appearing even before. Yeah, so I think we should already start it here closer to the 900 pixel media query, okay? Because it starts looking off already here at this point. So tablet port. So we have 6 RAM here for both the top and the right. So let's decrease that by 2 and put it to 4 in these two. And then the same thing here for the background. Okay, so, well, I don't know what this is doing here, so let's remove it. Okay, also decreasing it by 2 makes it 4.5 and 4.5. So sorry, double cursors here, 0.5 on both. Taking a look. Oh yeah, so that's much better. And for the phone, it's good as well. So we don't need a new media query here. Well, actually, we could do a new media query. Why not? Let's take a look at how it will look at an iPhone 5, for example. And for now, maybe just ignore that this is happening here. I'm not really sure why. I mean, this white space here, okay. And well, it looks like it's because of this element here probably moving out of the page. And so this is why this weird white stripe here is happening on the side. But anyway, we can see that this is quite not really good on the phone. So let's simply add another query for the phone here. And let's say 3, 3. And then the same thing over here. And so yeah, now we're good. Okay, we have to change it to responsive, and then we can click here in order to move across our viewports. So the navigation looks better now. Actually, let's open it. And as you can see, it looks pretty good without even changing a thing, even on these smaller sizes, okay? So everything's fine, everything's good. The header looks good as well now. And so now let's take a look at the footer, which is the final layout part which we have here. And so we see now that probably we should make these 100% as well, such as the columns, and then probably center all of this on the page. And we can decrease the space here as well a little bit, and maybe even this padding. And yeah, so there's a couple of things to change here. And so let's do that. So the first thing that we want to change is the padding, as I was saying. So include, respond, and I'm going to make it for the tablet in portrait again. So you see that this is probably the most important breakpoint we've been working on, along with the phone, actually. So the tablet in the landscape is not really such an important breakpoint from my experience. The most important one is the tablet in portrait, so 900 pixels, and the phone at 600 pixels. For the tablet in landscape mode, well, the most important change, we already did it by doing this. So in here we basically decreased the entire page. We zoomed it down, and that was already enough to make it looking good for width up until 1200 pixels. So between 900 and 1200. Now let's change the padding here then to a bit like 8 RAM and 0, for example. Then what we should change next is the navigation, okay? Because remember, let's just take a look at the HTML so that we're on the same page here. So the footer navigation and the footer copyright are these two elements that are basically side by side. So these are the ones we should manipulate right now. Okay, so let's say we want the width of 100% on this one, and a text align set to center. So let's see what that looks like. And yeah, that's much better already, but still not quite what we want, because this line should probably not go all the way until here. Okay, but let's take care of that in a second. For now, let's change this one here as well. So that is the copyright. So we also want the width to be 80%, and then we don't want any float here. So float, none, right? Okay, and that looks better, but it's again still not perfect. And that is because there's one thing that we should do and we haven't done up until this point, which is basically setting a padding for the row. Because remember, these two are in a row, right? So these two are the columns and they are inside of this row. And this row here, it has a width of 50 rem. And so that's probably way more than the width here at this viewport size. Okay, and that's why we're simply having 100% of the width. And we can also observe the same thing going on in here, right? So we should probably have some padding on this width, on the row. So a padding on the row is what we should have, right? So on the left and on the right side. So let's go back to the grid. And you'll see that this is going a bit back and forth between different stuff, but well, that's just how it goes, okay? So writing media queries is maybe not the most fun thing to do, but we still have to do it, of course. It is not so bad in my opinion, actually. So we were saying that we want a padding on the row, and so this here is the place where we should do it, right? So padding, top and bottom is 0, but we want it on the sides. So let's put like some 3 rams here and take a look at that. And all right, so that's better, right? That's much better actually. Well, something weird. Yeah, okay. So we have this scrolling going on still. So the page is right now larger than the screen, and so there's something that we will have to fix a bit later once again. For now, let's just continue with our media queries and then see what's happening a bit later. And so we will do that in the next lecture, so stay tuned. Let's continue writing our media queries right now in this video. So remember from the last video where I had this weird thing going on at the very end of the video where I could scroll like to the sides here? Well, it turns out that it had nothing to do with the media queries, but it was a bug here in the DevTools. So all I had to do was to click here to go back to the normal state and then click it again, and then everything was back to normal, okay? So maybe that happens to you also, and so that is the fix. So just toggle this, remove the state, and then come back. Okay, so that fixed it for me. It had nothing to do with the media queries. All right, and actually we had not yet finished the footer here. We wanted to decrease the space here, right? So let's quickly do that here in the footer. So it was here at the logo box. So the margin bottom, let's set it to like 4 rem only. That should be enough, why not? Okay, maybe 6, and but then we're good to go. So save, close, and let's now move on. So we took care of all of these now, of all of these 4 layout components. So let's now take care of the page itself. So let's take a look actually before we do anything. So that looks good now. And now let's see. So I think we have way too much space here in general, okay? So this is too much space, this is too much, this is too much. And so all of these sections, they have too much padding, okay? Let me see where that starts. And yeah, I think already here at the 900 pixel, so at the tablet portrait mode, it already starts to have too much padding. Okay, and so let's actually remove at least part of that. Okay, so include, respond, and tap port. So the section about has 25 RAM. So let's decrease that to 20. Okay. And yeah, that's better. Okay. And the same thing here. Okay. It's definitely better as well. And I see we also have too much space here. So this one here is definitely too much space as well. But let's take care of that later. Let's continue for now with the layout of the page. So we removed 5 RAM from that padding. And so let's probably do the same thing here in the features. So 15 in here. Then section tours 25, 15. And this is different. So this one is much larger than this one, simply because of the fact that we have this non-rectangular shape here, okay? And so we have to give it a bit more space in order to look more natural. So let's copy this one and then remove 5 on each side, such as we did before. Okay, let's copy it again. Section stories. Okay. So 10 RAM and 0. And the same thing here on this one. Well, it actually doesn't have... okay, sorry. So this is not of the sections. This is already part of the booking. Okay, so let's leave that one for later. Let's take a look now. And so we definitely have a decreased space now, and it looks better than before. We could probably decrease it even a bit more for the mobile. Okay. But, well, we can leave it as well. So 900 is this here. Looks okay on a tablet. Let's take a look, for example, at the iPad. And that looks acceptable for me. Now, iPhone 6, for example. And looks okay to me as well. Now, remember what I told you before, we have to test this on real devices so we have a real impression of what stuff looks like. But obviously in this course we cannot do that, but you should definitely try it when you build your own sites. Now, as I was telling, let's decrease the space here that we have there. So what's causing this is the... let me show it to you. It's this class, and it's even more down. So it's this margin bottom big. Okay, and it's one of the utilities. And so, of course, we can add media queries here as well. So 8 RAM currently, so let's change that. Let's put like 5 RAM or something like that. Okay, and now since we're at that, let's do the same thing here for the medium one, okay? So let's put like 3 RAM in here. And since these have importance, I'm going to put it here as well. And yeah, okay, it's better now. It's definitely better this way, right? Okay, so for the layout, that's it. Right? It looks acceptable, as I was saying. And of course, this is far from perfect because I'm not really 100% optimizing this web page here because it's not a project that is going to a real client. So if you want this to be 100% real for yourself, then you should probably go ahead and tweak this even more and test the hell out of it so that it becomes really polished. But I am here just fixing the major problems, okay? And well, the major problem that I see here next is this one, okay? So let's now move on to the next component. Actually, it's the first component that we're working on. And that is called the composition. Okay, and here we have to do some real major changes. Okay, and let me actually show you how I want this to look in the final version. So let's do something like this. Okay, so we have basically the images side by side. This one here is a bit bigger than the other two. So it's like scaled and looking as if it was on the top, but they're now like configured in a slightly different way than they were before so that they don't occupy so much space. So let's do that. And we need to make a lot of changes here. So starting with the photo, of course, because that's where the image itself is. So include, respond, and let's actually see where this starts to look really bad like this. And we see, okay, that it's happening again at the 900 pixel range here. So at the tablet portrait, okay? So tab, port. Okay, so what are we going to do with these? We will float them side by side, basically. So float left, and for that to work, we need them to have a relative position again. Because remember, up here we have an absolute positioning, but we're now getting rid of that. Okay. Also, I want the width to be the same for all. So 33.3333%. And then I also want them to have a slightly less pronounced shadow, let's say. So like only 3 for the blur, not like this. And then here, just 20% for the black color, okay? And then I also have to undo some of the stuff that is here on each of these elements. So let's do that. So top, set it to 0. And then some changes down here as well. So top to 0 here as well. And then what do we have here? We have left 20%. We don't want anything like that. Left 0. And actually, let me put the top 0 back here. All right. Now remember that we had some of them scaled up a bit. So let's take a look before we start that. All right. So now they are nicely sitting side by side. That's a lot better than what we had before already. But let's now, in order to make this a bit more creative, let's just slightly scale this one up and this one here as well. Or actually, all of them, why not? So the one in the middle can be the biggest one. This one slightly smaller than this here. Even smaller than that. All right, and now another thing that we can do is to put some top here. So 1 rem instead of 0 that we had. So to move this one down a bit and then move this one up a bit. So -1 rem. So let's take a look at that now. Well, that doesn't look okay. So looks like the transform didn't really apply. Transform, translate. And of course, that's not what I wanted at all. I wanted scale. Stupid mistake again. And now that looks a bit better than before. Now all we have to change is to put this one here on the top. So let's give it a higher z-index than the rest of them. Let's say just 100. All right. And actually this effect here still works. But on a touch device, this is not really going to happen anyway. So we can just ignore that one. Okay, so I like this section as it is right now. So let's move on here to the next one. And what I would change in here is maybe give it a bit less padding and decrease this kind of spacing here. Okay, so just small adjustment. And then we should be good to go as well. So composition, and where is this one? Yeah, it's a feature box. And I'm doing it in the same breakpoint again. So include respond tab port. So a slight decrease of the padding. And then here the margin can be actually set to 0. Okay, so just a really small adjustment. And now, well, I think we still have too much space here, to be honest. So let's decrease the padding that we have in the section, okay? So back to the home here. Yeah, down here. So section features. So let's put 10 here as well. And yeah, I prefer it this way. Now it looks more symmetric here. So the space between this one here, it's now equal, like the line is right at the middle of these two sections now. So a lot better. So we're doing great progress here. Now what we have to do next is to fix these next 3 sections. So this one here, the tours, then we can fix this one here because this looks really messy right now. And then finally we fix the booking, all right? But we're gonna leave that for the next lecture so that you can take a quick break here and then come back to coding this last part. So this is the third and last part of writing our media queries. And this time we're going to make the tours, the stories, and the book sections responsive. So starting with the tours, this is what it looks like right now. Now it actually doesn't look so bad, but the big problem here is that we have to actually touch it in order to rotate the card. Because on touch devices, there's no such thing as a hover. And so the only way to actually move the card is to click it. And that's not practical, right? We don't want this here to sit at the back of our card, right? So we must find a way to actually change this entire cart, okay? So this will be half a rewrite of this cart. And what I have in mind for this, so what I want to achieve in the end is just something like this, okay? Let me close this one here a bit. All right, so this entire cart will be like this. So this is similar to what we had before, then the list, and then the part that was originally on the back will now be here at the bottom, okay? And then that 3 times, one after the other. All right, and so this way people can actually see the price and click book now if they want to. So let's go ahead and do that. And once again, we're starting at the, of course, at the 900 pixel media query, so tablet portrait. So let's open up the cart. Here it is. And this time we are going to make it a bit differently, okay? Because this is like a whole rewrite of the entire thing. And so we're not just tweaking some stuff here. And so let's actually do a big media query at the end and then copy all of that in there and only change what we need to change, okay? So we put a big media query down here. So include, respond, tab, port. And now let's get this stuff here, copy it in there, and then we're gonna remove what we don't need, which is most of it, but it's still easier to do it like this than to copy all the things that we need. Okay, so select it again, just so I can indent it a bit. And so where is the end of this actually? Yeah. All right. Now we don't need any of these perspective stuff in the position. Also, we don't need, but what we can change is the height here. Okay, because remember we set this height here to make the front side the same size as the back side, and also to make the sides having the same height as the container, okay? But now that's no longer necessary, and so I don't want that. And so we set it to auto, okay? And so now we override that 52 and set it to auto. And the same thing actually here on the side, okay? Now what's also gonna happen is that these are no longer an absolute position, okay? So they will now be relative position because we now no longer have 2 sides basically occupying the same space, okay? And so they will now be relative. And so first we will have the front side, and then after that, the back side, remember? So we don't want to change this. We don't have to change any of this, I believe. This one should move as well. We don't need to change any of this. Then the front part also doesn't need any changing. And then the back part, we don't need any of this, but what we do need is to get rid of this transform. So right now the back part is rotated 180 degrees, remember, but we don't want that. So we need to change it back to 0, right? So let's now take a look actually. And well, actually not much changed, except that the back part is completely gone. So let's take a look at why that is happening. So cart side, and I see that it basically doesn't have any height. So let's see why that is happening. Well, actually the height is set to auto, so I'm not really sure what's going on here, but maybe it has to do with the fact that this cart here is absolute. Let's take a look at that. Well, that's also not the reason, but I'm sure it will just work out a bit later when we continue with this, okay? So the front side here should not rotate at all when we hover it. So set it to 0. And this here stays the same because the side back should also not rotate. And so this is just as it was. So we can get rid of it. All right. And now the styling here. So the first part should actually stay the same. Okay. So I want this to stay exactly the same. So the exact same style. So very simple, just get rid of all of this. We don't want to change anything. So all of that, let's remove it. All right, now here let's set it to relative as I did before in the DevTools. And then this one here we set to 0, and we want no translate at all. And we also want the 100% width. All right. This one we didn't change, so let's get rid of it. We don't want to change these as well. Maybe the margin, but first we have to actually see it. Then the price here, we don't want to change at all. And then the price value, maybe also the font size. We'll see about that. Okay, but anyway, let's take a look now, and now it should somehow appear. And yeah, so here it is. Great. So we should probably decrease this margin here. Then we should give this a padding here, and then use a clip path to make it look the same way as here. So this corner here. So this non-rectangular design, as I've been calling it. Okay, so let's start with that and remove this margin here. So the margin here, let's put it to something really small, like 3 rem. Some padding in here. So let's say padding 4 rem. And now, as I was saying, let's use a clip path here for the backside. Give it some space here so we can nicely separate it from the rest. Okay. So clip path, polygon. And how should this one look like? Well, if it starts here, okay, so it should start here. So this is the starting point. And so this time we don't start at 0, 0, because 0, 0 would be here. So in the X direction, so this way here, we still have 0, but in here we move down a little bit. Okay, so let's do that here. So 0x and maybe 15% in Y. And then the others are just the regular corners. So 100% in the X direction, 0 in the Y direction, right? And by now you're already 100% familiar with this, I'm sure. Now the other corner is 100, 100, because it's, just to remind you, this is 100 in the X direction and 100 in the Y direction, right? And now just the last part here, so that we don't cut off all of this. Okay, so in here we now have 0 again in the X direction and 100 in the Y direction. And that should do it. All right, now one thing is that, of course, here we don't have enough margin, but the bigger problem is these rounded corners that we have here. And then we also want the entire element to have a white background, okay? Plus, this shadow here is now only on the front side, and it should be on the entire thing. So 3 things that we have to change now. Let's do it. So starting with the border radius, let's remove it from here, and we can put it here on this element. So basically the container element, the card element itself. Then also we want the background color to be white. Color white. So that should fix it. And now the shadow that we had before, let me see where it is. And so yeah, it was here on the side, but we no longer want it on the side, we want it on the entire card element, right? So we need to change that. So the box shadow that was here, we need to remove it, set it to none, and then put it here on the card. All right, and now just for this padding here, it should be a bit more at the top. So let's say 7 rem at the top, 4 on the right, and then 4 on all the other sides. Okay, so let's take a look at this now. And all right, that looks pretty good to me, actually. Let's try to decrease it a bit. And yeah, it continues looking great, right? Maybe we can decrease some padding here. Let's take a look. Yeah, so we have 3 rem here. So let's get rid of that. Let's actually copy it from here, since that we already have it. So, whoa, what's that? What's going on here? So I closed this accidentally. All right, so just card details. Okay, I shouldn't have done this, I guess. Would be easier to just to have written it out. So padding at the top, let's put it to 0, and then on the side only 3 rem. So how does that look like? Well, maybe 1 rem is better, but that should be it. All right. So that are the cards. Looks pretty good now, I think. And yeah, maybe just decreasing this font size here, but that's also pretty easy for rem. All right, so next up we have this this story section here, and this looks a bit weird as well. So let's get rid of these problems. For starters, let's make this here a square again, so that it can really fit more text, and so that we don't waste all of this white space that we have here on the side. Okay, it's a big waste of space, and we don't need that on this small screen. So it is the story component, and so let's check it out. All right, so include, respond, and once again, let's do it for the tablet portrait. And starting to increase here the width to 100%. That should help already. So just take a look. And so we start here. And yeah, well, that's not really correct. It should be 90%. Is it 90%? Actually, let's take a look. Inspect. Okay, this is happening because of the row. Okay, so the row is taking away that space. But it still looks okay, I believe, actually, all the way until 600. So at 600 is when we should actually start to change things here, because up until this point, it's still okay. So let's just remove some padding here from this, and then we can move on to the phone media query, okay? So the padding that we have currently is, where is it? Yeah, 6 and 9. So we can decrease these values a bit to, say, 4 and 7. So decreasing them both by 2 ramps. And yeah, so now we have some more breathing space in here. Okay. And now at 600 pixels, so at the phone, let's do some more changes. So for the phone, we want to get rid of this completely, sort of this weird shape. So set it to 0. And then the same thing for the shape, of course, because right now it has 12 degrees to compensate for that, the skewing that we did there. Now we actually also have to copy this one here. Remember that it's the exact same thing. So this transform has to have the translate and the skew just like this one. But the translate is still okay, but what we need to change is the skew from 12 to 0, right? And then there should be another one somewhere. And where is it? Oh yeah, right here. Well, that's not what I wanted. All right. So that gets rid of the skewing. So, all right, that's better actually. All right, so this looks okay on all of these screen sizes here. So I'm pretty happy with this one. So let's move on. And this one here, to be honest, looks terrible, right? But it shouldn't be all too hard to fix. So let's very quickly do that as well. So the first part is here in the home, remember? So down here in this book section is where most of the layout actually happens. Okay, so let's include or mix in here, respond. And then let's actually take a look and where this starts to look that bad. So in here, it's kind of still acceptable, right? But then it starts to look really bad. And well, we should fix that. Even at this media query here. So the tablet landscape. So tab, land. And the main thing that we need to change is actually this gradient here. And what we can do for starters is to simply set this to 70, 70, and then also setting the width of this box where the form is in also to 70%. And that should already increase it and improve the situation. Okay, now one thing that we actually skipped when we designed this card was this height here, okay? So we should have removed that, but I totally forgot. So let's do that now, okay? Don't forget to remove that height. That was just for testing purposes, but for some reason I then let it there accidentally. So let's take a look. So 1210, all right, so that's better, to be honest. And now as we approach the 900 media query, okay, actually this image here is starting to already look a bit weird, so we should fix that. And I'm going to show you how. So what we'll do here is to basically make this image occupying the entire height and not the entire width as it's doing right now, okay? So why is it occupying the entire width right now? Well, that's because of background size 100%. Remember, that's similar to background cover, but it's not really the same, because what this does is to ensure that the image fits the container in the X direction, basically, okay? But what we want right now is really the cover, okay? So I'm going to change that to background size, actually, and cover. And actually, I think that 70 is a bit too much here. So 65, 65, and then down here as well, 65. And now it behaves just as we want it. Okay, so covering the entire element. Okay, and now starting from 900, so from the tablet size, we need to do some more changes. So respond, tab, port, okay, so this background image here is what needs to change, of course. Now we don't want this 105 degrees here. We don't care at all about that. Let's just put any direction, it doesn't really matter. So to right, okay, and now starting from 0 to 100% and no transparent at all. So it will all be covered in white now, okay? That's what we really want. And then the width in here should be, let's actually copy this. Support, and now we want the 100% width. All right. And so that looks pretty good. Now perfect here, so there's some more stuff that we can fix, of course. So let's do that as well. But for this part here, we're good. And so let's now go to the form. So what can we fix? And the first thing that came to my mind was to fix this radio group. So include respond tab port and set it width to 100% and maybe a margin to the bottom, because otherwise it will be one on top of another. And so yeah, that's better. Give it some more space. And now this looks like a real form to me. Also, I think there's something going on with this here. I think it's 90% width only, if I am not mistaken. So let's copy this. And yeah, that's right. So let's change that to width 100%. And here we go. All right. So this looks pretty good to me. It's not perfect, as I was saying in the beginning, but I don't want to worry all too much about this. I don't want to make it 100% perfect, because this was just to demonstrate you how we actually work with media queries. So I now encourage you to keep working at this, to make it really perfect, to change every single detail that could be better. I also want you to test this on real devices, if you can. And there's also a cool app that you can test, which is called CSS, I believe. Okay, then if you have your page online somewhere, then you can just enter the URL here, and then it will show you the page on a lot of different devices. You can just load this example here. And so this is how it looks like. So you have this page on all of these devices here at the same time, and you can check it out how it looks on all of them. Okay, so CSS is how it's called. I will also put a link on my resources page. All right, and I have one last challenge for you, which is actually when you hit this button here. Okay, so this is right now the pop-up, and I'm not going to change it because I want this to be a challenge for you. So before moving on, get your hands dirty with this part here of the website and make it completely responsive. You can put the images here on top, for example, or you can put them at the bottom, whatever you like. You're completely free to do it as you wish. Okay, so that's my challenge for you. And after that, we're going to move on to responsive images. Okay, so good luck with that challenge and see you later.